They burned her world, buried her name, and walked away smiling. But from those ashes, Mile rises, vengeance in human form. You're watching Revenge with Mireya, your favorite revenge channel. Don't forget to subscribe for more revenge stories. The ashes of Mile. Mile Ashford woke to the smell of smoke. Her first thought was the bakery downstairs. Perhaps she'd left the ovens on. But the heat was wrong, too intense, too close. She rolled from bed and saw orange light dancing beneath her door. Flames. The building was burning. She grabbed her phone and ran to the window, already feeling the floor heating beneath her bare feet. The fire escape was engulfed, metal glowing red in the pre-dawn darkness. She screamed for help, but the street was empty. This was the warehouse district, deserted at 4 a.m. She called emergency services, choking on smoke that poured through every crack. The operator's voice was calm, help was coming, but Mile could hear the timber groaning, feel the structure failing. She wrapped herself in wet towels and huddled by the window. Minutes felt like hours. When firefighters finally arrived, half the building had collapsed. They pulled her from the window unconscious, skin blistered, lungs damaged. She survived. Her bakery, her home, her life's work, all turned to ash. Mile spent 3 weeks in the hospital burn unit. The pain was extraordinary, but worse was the news the fire marshal delivered. The fire had been deliberately set. Accelerant poured throughout the first floor, timed to ignite during early morning hours. Someone had tried to kill her. The marshal showed her evidence. Security footage from a neighboring building showed a figure in dark clothing entering her bakery at 2 a.m., leaving 8 minutes later. The footage was grainy, the figure's face obscured. But Mile recognized the gait, the way the person moved. Her business partner, Quintessa Locke. They'd opened the bakery together 5 years ago, two friends with a shared dream. Mile handled the baking, the creative side. Quintessa managed finances and operations. The business had thrived, becoming the neighborhood's gathering place. But 6 months ago, Quintessa had proposed selling to a development company. Mile refused. The bakery was her heart. They'd argued bitterly. Quintessa had said she'd regret that decision. Mile just hadn't imagined how much. The police arrested Quintessa 3 days later. She denied everything, claimed the footage was inconclusive, hired expensive lawyers who got her released on bail within hours. The trial would take months to schedule. Meanwhile, Mile faced the wreckage of her existence. Her insurance company delayed payment, citing ongoing investigation. Without funds, she couldn't rebuild. Her apartment was destroyed, her equipment melted slag, her recipes, years of development, incinerated. She moved into a shelter, then a friend's couch, then cheap motels when the friend's patients wore thin. Her medical bills were catastrophic. The burns required surgeries, physical therapy, treatments that drained her meager savings. She applied for jobs, but her scarred hands shook. Her lungs couldn't handle sustained exertion, and employers saw damaged goods. Quintessa, meanwhile, walked free. She'd sold the bakery's location to developers for $2 million, the insurance payout and land value combined. Without Mile's opposing ownership share, which had burned with everything else, Quintessa claimed full ownership through emergency corporate bylaws. It was legal theft, blessed by paperwork Mile had never seen. Mile spent her days in the public library, using free computers to research her case. She discovered that Quintessa's betrayal went deeper than she'd imagined. The development company buying the land was owned by Quintessa's brother, Dashiell Locke. The expensive lawyers were family friends. The insurance delays were facilitated by an adjuster Quintessa had dated. Every piece was connected, a web of corruption designed to steal everything Mile had built. She found more. Quintessa had been systematically embezzling from the bakery for 2 years, hiding it through creative accounting. The money went into offshore accounts, untraceable through normal channels. The sale to her brother was structured to avoid taxes and scrutiny. They'd planned this for years, waiting for the right moment. Mile's refusal to sell had simply accelerated their timeline. She sat in the library, surrounded by printouts and notes, and felt something cold settle into her chest. The legal system was too slow, too corrupt, too easily manipulated by money. If she wanted justice, she'd have to create it herself. Mile moved through the world like a ghost. Her scars made people look away, her poverty made her invisible. She used both. She started following Quintessa, learning her routines, her vulnerabilities. Quintessa lived in a luxury condo now, drove an expensive car, wore designer clothes bought with stolen money. She ate at restaurants where a single meal cost more than Mile's weekly budget. She laughed with friends, posted photos on social media of her perfect life. She'd stolen everything and felt no remorse. Mile watched and learned. She discovered that Quintessa frequented a particular nightclub on Fridays, that she had a weakness for younger men, that she drove home drunk more often than not. She learned that Dashiell had a gambling problem, debts to dangerous people that he paid with development profits. She learned that the insurance adjuster was married with children, conducting multiple affairs. Everyone in Quintessa's circle was corrupt, compromised, or complicit. They'd all profited from Miles' destruction. The old Mile, the one who believed in goodness and fair play, had burned in that fire. What emerged from the ashes was something harder, colder, capable of things she'd never imagined. Miles' revenge began with Dashiell. His gambling debts made him the easiest target. She learned he owed $300,000 to a loan shark named Corvus Thane, money that was due in 2 weeks. She also learned that Dashiell kept leverage documents in a safe in his office, contracts, permits, bribe receipts for various projects. Insurance in case his partners turned on him. She needed those documents. She got a job cleaning offices in his building, using a fake identity and references she'd created from purchased social security numbers. The background check company was cheap, careless. She worked nights, invisible in her janitor's uniform. After a week of observation, she knew the security schedules, camera blind spots, and access codes careless employees left visible. On a Thursday night when Dashiell stayed late, she broke into his office during her shift. The safe was behind a bookshelf combination lock. She'd watched him open it twice, memorizing the sequence. Inside was a treasure trove, documents proving bribery, fraud, tax evasion, connections to organized crime. She photographed everything, replaced it exactly, and disappeared into the night. The next day she sent copies anonymously to the district attorney, the state attorney general, and 3 investigative journalists. The documents hit the news within 48 hours. Developers' empire built on corruption screamed the headlines. Federal investigators raided Dashiell's offices and home. They froze his assets. The loan shark, seeing his debtor under investigation, decided to collect his debt through other means. Dashiell was found beaten in a parking garage, hospitalized with broken bones and a ruptured spleen. The message was clear. The $300,000 was still due, investigation or not. Quintessa scrambled to protect her brother, using some of her stolen money to pay his debts. Mile watched the $2 million shrink, but the documents created larger problems. They implicated Quintessa too. Her name appeared on several bribe receipts, her signature on fraudulent permits. The authorities began investigating the bakery sale, questioning its timing relative to the fire. Quintessa's lawyers worked overtime, but with federal attention, they couldn't simply make problems disappear. Mile felt the first spark of satisfaction. She'd barely begun, and already their empire was crumbling. She'd learned that people like Quintessa built their lives on foundations of lies. Remove one lie and the whole structure weakened. Next, Mile turned her attention to Riker Vance, the insurance adjuster who delayed her claim while expediting Quintessa's payout. He'd profited handsomely from the arrangement, $50,000 deposited in an offshore account matching one of Quintessa's shells. Mile had found it in the documents from Dashiell's safe. Riker had a wife, Celestine, and 3 children. He also had 5 different affairs with women he'd met through work. Mile didn't judge the affairs themselves, but the pattern was useful. She contacted each woman anonymously, posing as another of his lovers, sharing details about the others. Within days, the women were comparing notes, realizing they'd all been manipulated. One was a lawyer, another a journalist. Together, they decided to expose him. Simultaneously, Mile sent evidence of the bribe to his employer's internal investigation department and the state insurance commissioner. She included proof that he'd falsified multiple claims, not just Miles, stealing from vulnerable people who'd lost everything. The insurance company fired him immediately to avoid liability. His wife divorced him. The state revoked his license and filed criminal charges. His life collapsed in 2 weeks. Mile watched it happen from a distance, feeling no pity. He'd profited from suffering. Now he'd learn what suffering meant. With Dashiell hospitalized, his assets frozen, and Riker destroyed, Quintessa was isolated and panicking. Mile saw it in her surveillance, Quintessa checking her phone constantly, meeting with lawyers at all hours, liquidating assets. She was preparing to run. Mile couldn't allow that. She escalated. She'd learned during her research that Quintessa had connections to organized crime beyond just the loan shark. She'd facilitated money laundering through the bakery without Miles' knowledge. She'd found evidence of cash deposits that didn't match sales, withdrawals that disappeared into criminal enterprises. Quintessa was deeper in the underworld than Mile had realized. Mile copied all evidence and sent it to Corvus Thane, the loan shark Dashiell owed. She included a note. Quintessa Locke stole from you. She's been skimming from laundering operations for years. Check the attached accounts. It was a calculated move. Men like Corvus didn't forgive theft. They responded with violence. Mile was gambling that he'd confront Quintessa, scare her, maybe hurt her but not kill her. She wanted Quintessa alive for what came next. She wanted her to suffer publicly, legally, slowly. Death would be too quick, too merciful. Corvus sent his enforcers to Quintessa's condo. They didn't hurt her physically, but the psychological damage was profound. They made clear she had 1 week to return the stolen money, 200,000 plus interest, or face consequences. Quintessa had the money barely, but paying it would drain her reserves. She'd lose her condo, her car, her lifestyle. She'd be left with nothing. She paid. Mile watched Quintessa's bank accounts through illegal access she'd purchased from a hacker on the dark web. She watched the transfers, the desperation. Good, let her feel what poverty meant. Let her understand what it was like to lose everything. But Mile wasn't done. With Quintessa now vulnerable, she arranged a meeting. She sent a message from a burner phone. We need to talk about what you did. Meet me at the burned bakery site midnight. Come alone or I go to the police with what I know. It was a risk. Quintessa might not come, might bring someone, might call the police herself. But Mile gambled that curiosity and fear would compel her. That night, hidden in shadows across from the empty lot where her bakery once stood, she watched Quintessa arrive. Alone, trembling, looking around nervously. Perfect. Mile stepped into the light and Quintessa's face went white. You're supposed to be broken, Quintessa whispered. I am broken, Mile said calmly. You broke me, you burned everything I loved and tried to kill me. Why? Quintessa's fear transformed into anger. You were holding me back. That bakery was worth millions, but you wanted to play artist, making fancy cakes for pennies. I saw the opportunity and you were too stubborn to take it. So you tried to murder me. I thought you'd be out, Quintessa snapped. You always worked late elsewhere on Wednesday nights. You weren't supposed to be upstairs. Mile absorbed this. She changed her schedule that week, stayed home with a cold. Random chance had put her in the fire. Quintessa had been willing to destroy the bakery but hadn't specifically intended murder, though she'd clearly accepted it as acceptable collateral damage. It didn't matter. Attempted murder or arson resulting in assault, the legal distinction was irrelevant. You destroyed my life for money, Mile said. Yes, Quintessa replied, defiant now. And I'd do it again. You're weak, Mile. This world belongs to people who take what they want. You're right, Mile agreed. I was weak, I'm not anymore. Quintessa realized her mistake too late. She looked around wildly, seeing the phone Mile held up, the recording app clearly visible. That won't hold up in court, Quintessa said desperately. It might not, Mile agreed, but it doesn't need to. The police already have physical evidence from your brother's safe. They have financial records showing your embezzlement and money laundering. They have witness testimony from the women Riker worked with. They're building a case against you, and this recording just confirms motive and confession. Quintessa lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but Mile was ready. She stepped back, and from the shadows 2 figures emerged, police detectives who'd been waiting. Mile had contacted them earlier, offering to draw Quintessa out for a confession. They'd been skeptical but agreed when Mile showed them preliminary evidence. Now they had their confession, recorded with their knowledge and permission, legal and binding. They arrested Quintessa on the spot, reading her rights while she screamed obscenities. Mile watched without emotion. This was justice, but it wasn't enough. Legal consequences would take years to fully unfold. Mile needed more. She needed Quintessa to lose everything as she had. The arrest was just the beginning. The trial was a media sensation. The story had everything: betrayal, attempted murder, corruption, and a victim who'd risen from literal ashes to bring down her tormentor. Mile attended every day, her scars visible, a silent reminder of what Quintessa had done. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They had evidence from Dashiell's documents, the confession recording, financial forensics showing embezzlement and money laundering, and testimony from the fire marshal about deliberate arson. Quintessa's lawyers tried to argue she'd been coerced into the confession, that the evidence was circumstantial, but the jury wasn't convinced. Dashiell offered a plea deal to testify against his sister, took it. He described her plan, her cold calculation, her lack of remorse. Riker, facing his own charges, also testified, confirming the insurance fraud. Person after person, Quintessa's co-conspirators turned against her to save themselves. She sat alone at the defense table, her expensive lawyers unable to overcome the mountain of evidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts: attempted murder, arson, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. The judge sentenced her to 35 years without possibility of parole for 15. Quintessa screamed as they led her away. With Quintessa convicted, Mile finally received her insurance payout, the full amount plus punitive damages from the company for Riker's misconduct. The settlement was substantial. Additionally, civil courts ordered Quintessa to pay restitution from the sale proceeds that had been frozen. Mile received nearly $3 million total. It was more money than she'd ever imagined having. She used it carefully. First, she paid off all medical debt and legal fees. Then she bought the lot where her bakery had stood. The developer had backed out once the corruption became public, property values plummeted, and she got it for a fraction of what Quintessa had sold it for. She hired an architect to design a new building, not just a bakery but a community center with commercial kitchen space, classrooms, and affordable apartments above. She wanted to create something that would serve the neighborhood Quintessa had tried to exploit. Construction took 8 months. During that time, Mile worked on herself. Mori surgeries improved her hand function. Physical therapy helped her strength and stamina. Therapy helped her process the trauma. She'd never be the person she was before the fire, but she was becoming someone new, someone stronger. The new bakery opened on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 2 years after the fire. Mile had named it Phoenix Hearth, a bit on the nose perhaps, but meaningful. The building was beautiful, all windows and warm wood, designed to welcome rather than exclude. The kitchen gleamed with professional equipment. The apartment spaces were filled with families who'd been displaced by the very development schemes Dashiell and Quintessa had run. The neighborhood turned out in force for the opening. People who'd mourned the original bakery's loss celebrated its rebirth. Former customers lined up for pastries. Local news covered it as a feel-good story of resilience. Mile worked the counter, her scarred hands steady now, creating the same recipes she'd perfected years ago. Some recipes had been lost, but she'd recreated most from memory. Others she'd invented, new creations born from her experience. She'd hired 3 employees, people like her, who'd been knocked down by circumstances and needed second chances. By day's end, she was exhausted but satisfied. She'd done more than rebuild her bakery. She'd proven that destruction wasn't permanent, that people could rise from ashes, that revenge could transform into renewal. Mile began receiving letters from Quintessa 3 months after her incarceration. The first was vitriolic, full of blame and rage. Mile burned it unread after the first paragraph. The second, arriving a month later, was more subdued. Quintessa complained about prison conditions, hinted that she'd been wronged, asked if Mile felt satisfied with her revenge. Mile didn't respond. More letters came, each showing Quintessa's slow psychological decline. Prison was harsh and Quintessa had lived her entire life in comfort. She wasn't adapting well. The letters became desperate, then pleading. Quintessa asked for forgiveness, for intervention, for help. She claimed to be changed, reformed, sorry. Mile read these with detachment. She didn't believe Quintessa's transformation. Prison changed some people, but Quintessa's sociopathy ran deeper than circumstances could reach. She'd manipulated everyone in her life. These letters were just another manipulation attempt. Mile finally wrote back once, a single sentence. "You taught me that this world belongs to people who take what they want. Thank you for the lesson." She never wrote again. The letters kept coming for a while, then stopped. Mile heard through news reports that Quintessa had been involved in a prison fight, stabbed by another inmate over some petty dispute. She survived but was transferred to maximum security. The world had its own justice. As Phoenix Hearth thrived, Mile expanded her mission. She established the Ashford Foundation, dedicated to helping fire victims rebuild their lives. She understood intimately what they needed: immediate cash assistance, housing support, legal advocacy, medical care coordination. The foundation provided all of it, funded by profits from her bakery and careful investments of her settlement money. She partnered with law firms to pursue arson cases aggressively. She lobbied for stronger insurance regulations to prevent what Riker had done to her. She testified before state legislatures about the gaps in victim support systems. Her scars made her testimony powerful. She was a living reminder that fires destroyed more than property. The foundation helped hundreds of people in its first year. Mile hired staff, including Zephyr Ashton, a former investigative journalist who'd covered her trial and was passionate about exposing corruption. Together, they uncovered dozens of cases similar to hers: insurance fraud, delayed claims, arson for profit. They brought media attention to each one, forcing accountability. Mile had learned that personal revenge was satisfying but limited. Systemic change could help countless others. She turned her pain into purpose, her anger into advocacy. It felt better than revenge ever had. 4 years after the fire, Mile received an unexpected visitor. Dashiell Locke appeared at Phoenix Hearth on a Tuesday afternoon looking haggard and old. Prison and betrayal had aged him decades. He'd served 2 years of a 5-year sentence, was out on parole. "I need to apologize," he said without preamble. Miles studied him, his hands shook, his eyes were hollow. Whatever man he'd been before was gone, replaced by someone broken. "Your sister tried to have me killed," Miles said flatly. "I know," Dashiell replied. "I helped her, I knew what she was planning, and I did nothing. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I just needed to say I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that if I could change it, I would." "You can't change it," Miles said. "No," he agreed. "I can't, but I've spent every day since wishing I could. Quintessa destroyed you, but she destroyed me too. I lost everything, my business, my freedom, my family. My wife left me, my kids won't speak to me. I deserved all of it." Mile felt nothing looking at him. No satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness. "Why tell me this?" "Because you deserve to hear it," he said. "That's all." He left. Mile never saw him again. She learned later he'd overdosed 6 months after that conversation. Perhaps it was suicide, perhaps accidental. It didn't matter. The past was littered with the wreckage of people who'd chosen wrong. 5 years after the fire, Mile met Tamsin Everhart at a foundation event. Tamsin was a photographer documenting recovery stories, and she wanted to feature Miles' journey. Their professional relationship became friendship, and friendship became something more. Tamsin was patient with Miles' scars, physical and emotional. She understood that trust was difficult, that intimacy required time. They dated slowly, carefully. Tamsin moved into the apartment above the bakery after a year. They married in a small ceremony 2 years later. Together, they turned one of the building's apartments into a home, filled with light and laughter and the smell of bread baking. Mile had never imagined finding happiness again after the fire. She'd focused so completely on survival, revenge, and rebuilding that personal joy seemed impossible. But Tamsin taught her that healing didn't mean forgetting, that you could acknowledge pain while still creating beauty. They talked about having children, about expanding the foundation, about growing old together. Plans that once seemed impossible now felt inevitable. Miles still had nightmares about the fire, still flinched at unexpected sounds, still carried the trauma. But she also had this, a partner, a home, a future. Quintessa had tried to take everything. Instead, she'd inadvertently given Mile the gift of knowing what truly mattered. 7 years after the fire, Mile received a request that surprised her. Quintessa wanted to see her. She'd written through official prison channels, requesting a victim-offender dialogue session facilitated by the Department of Corrections. Miles' first instinct was refusal. She'd moved on, built a beautiful life. Quintessa was buried in the past where she belonged, but curiosity nagged at her. What could Quintessa possibly want to say after 7 years? She agreed with conditions. The meeting would be recorded, Tamsin could attend, and she could leave at any moment. The session was scheduled for a Friday afternoon at the prison. Mile and Tamsin drove together, neither speaking much. The prison was exactly as grim as expected, grey concrete, barbed wire, guards with dead eyes. Quintessa was brought into the meeting room in shackles, looking nothing like the polished woman Mile remembered. Prison had hollowed her out, left her gaunt and aged. They sat across from each other with a facilitator between them. "Thank you for coming," Quintessa said, her voice raspy. Mile nodded but said nothing. "I wanted to tell you I understand now what I took from you," Quintessa continued. "I've had 7 years to think about nothing else. I was wrong. I was evil. I destroyed your life for money, and I can never make that right." Mile listened as Quintessa spoke. It was the same apology she'd written in letters, but spoken aloud it carried different weight. Quintessa detailed her understanding of the harm she'd caused, not just the physical injuries but the psychological trauma, the loss of security, the theft of Miles' innocence and trust. She talked about her own childhood, a father who valued wealth above everything, who taught her that winning meant taking. She didn't offer it as excuse, just explanation. She talked about prison, about violence she'd experienced, about finally understanding what it meant to be powerless. "I became what I feared most," Quintessa said. "Someone without control, without choices, trapped and suffering. It's less than what I deserve." The facilitator asked Mile if she wanted to respond. Mile considered carefully. She could rage, could list every way Quintessa had damaged her. She could refuse the apology, deny forgiveness, or she could speak truth. "I don't forgive you," Mile said clearly. "I don't think I ever will. What you did was unforgivable, but I don't hate you anymore either. I did for a long time. That hatred nearly destroyed me as much as the fire did. I let it go not for you but for myself." Quintessa nodded, tears streaming. "I understand. I hope you find peace, Mile added. But I don't need to be part of that process. This is goodbye, Quintessa, permanently. Mile left the prison feeling lighter. She'd thought confronting Quintessa would bring satisfaction or anger, but instead it brought something unexpected: indifference. Quintessa was no longer important. She was just a person who'd made terrible choices and was living with consequences. The story was over. Driving home, Tamsin reached over and squeezed her hand. How do you feel? Free, Mile answered, surprised by how true it was. She'd spent years carrying Quintessa's betrayal like chains, letting it define her, shape her choices, motivate her actions. Now it was just history, something that had happened but didn't control her present. She'd reclaimed her life not through revenge, but through refusing to let Quintessa matter anymore. That night, Mile and Tamsin hosted a dinner party at their apartment. Friends from the neighborhood, employees from the bakery, colleagues from the foundation, people who'd become family through shared purpose and genuine care. They laughed over wine and fresh bread. Someone told jokes. Someone else shared news of an engagement. Normal, beautiful, mundane moments that once seemed impossible. Mile looked around the table and realized this was the ultimate revenge. Happiness despite everything, community despite betrayal, love despite loss. 10 years after the fire, Phoenix Hearth had become more than a bakery. It was a neighborhood institution, a symbol of resilience. The foundation had helped thousands of fire victims, changed insurance regulations in 3 states, and pioneered victim advocacy programs. Mile had written a book about her experience, which became a bestseller and funded further expansion. She gave talks at universities, conferences, and community centers about trauma recovery and systemic reform. Her story inspired others who'd faced their own destructions to rebuild rather than surrender. She mentored dozens of survivors, teaching them what she'd learned: that revenge was natural but insufficient, that justice mattered but wasn't everything, that the real victory was refusing to let trauma define your future. Tamsin's photography had documented hundreds of recovery stories, creating a powerful visual archive of human resilience. Together, they'd built something larger than themselves. Quintessa remained in prison, largely forgotten by everyone except those she directly harmed. Occasionally, news articles mentioned her as a footnote in stories about corporate corruption or insurance fraud. She'd become a cautionary tale, nothing more. Her legacy was warning. Mile's legacy was hope. The story ended not in a courtroom or confrontation, but in an ordinary moment on an ordinary Tuesday. Miles stood in her kitchen, flour dusting her scarred hands, teaching a group of teenagers from the neighborhood how to make croissants. They were part of a culinary training program the foundation sponsored, giving at-risk youth marketable skills and purpose. One girl, Isolde, struggled with the lamination technique, growing frustrated. "I can't do it," she said, ready to give up. Mile recognized that feeling intimately, the desire to surrender when things seemed impossible. She guided Isolde's hands gently, showing her the rhythm. "You can," she said firmly. "It just takes practice, patience, and refusing to quit even when it's hard. That's the secret to everything worth doing." The girl tried again, and this time the dough folded perfectly. Her face lit up with pride. Mile smiled, seeing herself in that moment of triumph over difficulty. This was what rising from ashes meant. Not grand revenge or dramatic victories, but quiet persistence, daily choice to build rather than destroy, decision to teach rather than wound. Quintessa had tried to burn her. Instead, she'd forged her into something stronger. The ashes of Mile had become the foundation for 1,000 other lives rebuilt, a legacy that would outlast them all.